and welcome to Crowvane Manor. Wherever you are, and whatever kind of night it's been, you've come to the right place to slow down. Let the world go quiet for a while. Out here, none of it needs your attention. Many of you return to these rooms night after night, and I'm grateful for that. There's a reason you keep coming back. The stories kept inside these walls aren't quite like the ones you'll hear anywhere else. Before we begin, leave a comment and tell me where in the world you're listening from tonight. I always enjoy reading them. And if these stories stay with you, a like and a subscribe help more than you know. Now get comfortable, breathe slow, and let's open the door together. In the early 90s, after a heavy storm rain, we found a genuine monster in our backyard ditch. I do not use that word lightly. I know people call strange animals monsters all the time when they do not understand what they are looking at. But this was different. This was not a mangy dog, not a dead raccoon, not a possum swollen by water, not a coyote that had lost its fur, and not some normal animal made ugly by death. What we found in that ditch looked like something that should not have existed at all. The storm had been bad. It had come through with hard rain, the kind that beats against the roof and windows for hours and leaves the ground soft and torn up afterward. The ditch behind our house had filled and run with dirty water, dragging leaves, sticks, mud, and whatever else the storm had pulled loose from the land around us. The next day, or not long after the storm had passed, we went out into the backyard and found it there, dead, lying in the ditch like it had been washed in by the rain, or like it had crawled there and died. At first, I do not think any of us understood what we were seeing. It was pink and completely hairless, and that alone made it hard to place. Hair does a lot for an animal. It gives the body shape and identity. A raccoon looks like a raccoon partly because of its mask and fur. A dog looks like a dog partly because of its coat. Even a rat or possum has a certain look because of its hair and skin. But this thing had no fur at all. No patchy hair. No rough mange. No little leftover tufts clinging to the body. It was pure, slick skin, pink and smooth. And the skin made it look raw, even though it did not look wounded in the way you would expect. It was slightly bigger than a small dog, but it was not really shaped like one. That was the first problem. If it had only been a hairless animal the size of a dog, maybe we could have called it a dog and moved on. But its proportions were wrong. Its body looked powerful, compact in some places and stretched in others, with muscles that did not seem to belong to a sick or weak creature. Even dead, it looked strong. The shoulders, the limbs, the way the body sat in the ditch, everything about it gave the impression that this had not been some helpless little animal. It had been a beast, a strong one. Its hands were long and clawed. I say hands because that is what they looked like, though not human hands. They were not like raccoon paws either. Raccoons have clever-looking little hands, and you can tell what they are once you have seen them a few times. This thing's hands were different. The fingers were long, ending in large claws that looked like they could grip, tear, and hold on to something with real force. They were not delicate. They were not shaped like the paws of an ordinary pet or woodland animal. They looked wrong in that strange way where part of your mind recognizes hand, but another part refuses to accept it because it knows no animal should have a hand like that. Then there was the tail. It had a long, fat rat tail, thick and ugly, stretched out from the body. That tail alone could have pushed someone's mind toward rat, possum, or some kind of large rodent, but nothing else matched well enough. It was too big, too muscular, too clawed. too strange. The tail looked like one piece of a known animal attached to a body that did not belong to it. It made the whole thing feel put together from parts, but not in a way that looked fake. It looked real. That was what made it so disturbing. It was not some rubber Halloween thing. It was a dead animal, heavy and present and lying there in our ditch. But the head was the worst part. The head was unlike anything on Earth. That is the part I still cannot explain. If you only looked at the body from a distance, you might have been able to guess it was some animal stripped hairless by the storm, or by disease, or by exposure. You could have tried to force it into a category. Maybe a dog with mange, maybe a raccoon, maybe a possum, maybe some strange wild animal we did not normally see. You could have made guesses and felt somewhat comfortable, at least until you saw the head. Once you saw the head, every normal explanation started to break apart. Its jaw was square and powerful, not like a dog's jaw, not like a raccoon's jaw, not like anything I had seen in real life. The mouth was pulled open in death, frozen in an angry, toothy snarl, almost like it had died screaming. Its red gums showed around the teeth, and the teeth were long and sharp. They were not arranged in the normal way you expect from a dog or a raccoon. It was not just a set of canines with smaller teeth around them. It looked like fangs all through the mouth, long, sharp points lining the jaw in a way that made it seem built for ripping. I know how dramatic that sounds, but that is what it looked like. The mouth looked like a warning, even after the thing was dead. Its face had frozen in this awful expression, like rage and pain had locked it in place. The snarl was not just a dead animal's mouth hanging open. It looked angry. It looked hateful. It looked like the final moment had caught it in the middle of some furious scream. Even as a child, I felt that. I did not have the words for anatomy or animal identification yet, but I knew that face was wrong. It had the kind of expression that made you want to step back, even though the creature could not move anymore. And the eyes. The eyes were what made it feel almost impossible. They were human-looking, sky blue, bulging wide and round, rolled up in death. I have seen animal eyes. Even when they are strange, they still look like animal eyes. These did not. These eyes had something too familiar in them, something that made the rest of the face even more disturbing. A dead creature with long claws, a rat tail, fangs through its jaw, smooth pink skin, and then eyes that looked too close to human. Not human exactly, but close enough that your brain noticed and hated it. They were wide and dead, rolled back, but still blue, still bright in a way that should not have been possible in that horrible face. If you have ever seen the movie Willow, it looked like one of those rat beast dog things they use to track the baby, except pink and hairless. Or like that giant wolfish beast from the Ewoks movie, if something had stripped away all its fur and left only a smooth, slick body behind. Those were the only comparisons my mind could make, because normal animals did not help. Movie monsters made more sense than wildlife. But even those comparisons are not perfect, because the skin was its own problem. People always say mange when they hear about a hairless, strange animal, and I understand why. Mange can make animals look horrible. A fox with mange can look like something from another world. A raccoon with severe hair loss can look almost demonic. A sick dog or coyote can lose so much fur that it becomes difficult to recognize. I know that now better than most people. But this did not look like mange. The skin had no pores, no hair follicles, no sign that fur had ever grown from it. It was not patchy or inflamed in the way a diseased animal's skin often is. It was pure, slick smooth, like it was born that way. That was what bothered my family, too. My family knows animals. We have raised many, seen many, and traveled just to see them. We were not a family that looked at every strange creature and panicked because we had no experience. We understood animals better than average people. We knew farm animals, pets, wildlife, and enough general husbandry to understand what healthy, sick, young, old, injured, and dead animals can look like. We had seen things. We knew that nature can be strange and ugly. We knew that disease can twist an animal's appearance. We knew that water and decay can change a body. But this thing still did not make sense. Everyone looked at it, and nobody had a good answer. That is one of the details that has stayed with me all my life. It was not only me being a child and not knowing enough. If the adults had looked at it and said, "Oh, that's just a raccoon with mange," I probably would have accepted it. If someone had said that is a hairless dog, or that is a possum, or that is something that washed out of a trap, maybe the mystery would have died right there in the ditch. But that did not happen. The people around me were confused too. The creature perplexed us. It made everyone stop and stare. It forced even animal people into silence. Because I was so young, I told myself that maybe I simply did not know enough animals yet. That seemed like the most reasonable answer at the time. I was a child. The world was huge. There were animals I had never seen. Animals from other countries, strange breeds, rare deformities, diseases, and things adults might know that I did not. I thought maybe one day I would learn what it was. Maybe I would see a picture in a book and feel that sudden recognition. Maybe someone would mention a species I had never heard of, and everything would click into place. I believed the answer was out there, waiting for me to grow old enough and educated enough to find it. But that beast changed something in me. It became the reason I wanted to study animals. Not just casually, not just because animals were interesting, but because I needed answers. I started studying zoology, ecology, animal biology, and everything connected to living creatures. I learned about animals from every corner of the earth. Forest animals, desert animals, deep water animals, cave animals, parasites, mammals, reptiles, amphibians, strange fish, rare diseases, genetic mutations, deformities, scavenger damage, decomposition, mange, hairless breeds, exposed skin, skull shapes, jaw structures, claws, tails, teeth, eyes, everything. Every new animal I learned about became another possible door back to that ditch. I studied animals from the darkest holes in the deepest underwater trenches. I learned about creatures that most people never think about. I learned how weird nature can truly be. I learned that some real animals look fake, and some diseases can turn familiar animals into nightmares. I learned that bodies change after death, especially after storms and exposure. I learned that hairless animals can look much larger or smaller than expected, and that swelling, decay, or water can distort shapes. I learned all the normal explanations that people use when they try to solve stories like mine. And still, I never found it. That is what makes the memory feel heavier now than it did when I was young. Back then, the mystery could hide behind my ignorance. I could say, I just don't know enough yet. But now, I know a lot. Now there are hardly any animals I would not recognize inside and out, even diseased. I can look at a sick fox and know it. I can see a mangy raccoon and understand what I am seeing. I can look at strange skulls, odd paws, swollen bodies, hairless mammals, and rare conditions with a trained mind. I know how wrong animals can look when nature, sickness, and death have worked on them. But the thing in that ditch still does not fit. Its identity is still there in the corner of my mind, waiting. That demon, that beast, that impossible body after the storm. I do not mean demon in the religious sense, exactly. I mean, it looked like something that did not belong to the animal world I have spent my life learning. It was a question with claws, teeth, and sky blue human eyes. It was dead, but it did not feel finished. It left something behind in me, a need to keep searching. Every animal I learn is, in some quiet way, part of my pursuit of that beast. That sounds dramatic, but it is true. When I study a new species, when I learn about a rare mammal, when I see pictures of strange animals without fur, some part of me compares them to what I saw in that ditch. The size, the tail, the claws, the jaw, the eyes, the skin. I check each possibility against the memory, and one by one, they fail. Some come close in one area, but fall apart in another. A hairless raccoon might explain the hands, but not the head. A dog might explain the size, but not the tail or the teeth. A possum might explain the tail, but not the body or the jaw. A fox with mange might explain the skin condition, but not the smooth, poreless look or the human eyes. Nothing matches all of it. Memory can be tricky, and I know that. I know childhood memories can grow stranger over time. I know fear can sharpen certain details and distort others. I have asked myself many times if my mind made it worse than it was. Maybe the storm, the ditch, and the shock of finding a dead, hairless animal turned a real animal into a monster in my memory. Maybe the head seemed stranger because I was young. Maybe the teeth looked longer because the gums had pulled back in death. Maybe the eyes looked human because they were pale and rolled upward. Maybe the skin seemed poreless because I did not know what to look for back then. I have considered all of that, but my family saw it too. That is what keeps me from dismissing it as only a child's imagination. It was not just me. The adults were confused. The animal people were confused. The ones who had seen enough to know better did not know what it was either. The memory may have changed around the edges, but the core of it has always stayed the same. Pink, hairless, smooth skin, muscular body, long clawed hands, fat rat tail, square jaw, long sharp fangs, human-looking sky blue eyes, dead in the ditch after the storm. That image has followed me for decades. Sometimes I wonder where it came from. Did the storm wash it out of some hidden place? Did it live somewhere nearby, unseen, until the rain killed it or carried its body into our yard? Was it born deformed? Was it someone's escaped exotic animal? Was it a species I still have not found in any book or database? Was it a known animal changed by some rare condition so completely that even experienced eyes could not place it? Or was it something else? Something that does not sit comfortably inside the usual categories? I do not know. I know there are animals people rarely see. I know new species are still discovered. I know the world is larger and stranger than most of us think. But I also know that a creature slightly bigger than a small dog, with that kind of body, that kind of jaw, those claws, that tail, and those eyes, should not be able to hide easily from human knowledge. It should have a name. It should have a place in a field guide. It should belong somewhere. And yet, for me, it never has. Maybe it was the last of its kind. That thought has stayed with me more than I like to admit. Maybe that dead thing in our backyard ditch was not just an unknown animal, but the end of something. The final body of a creature that had lived unseen for generations, washed into our yard by a storm after dying alone. Maybe no one will ever find another one, because there are no more to find. It is a strange and sad thought, but somehow it feels possible when I remember the way it looked. Powerful, angry, and extinct before we even knew what it was. Or maybe the answer is simple, and I have spent my whole life chasing a childhood nightmare. That is the other possibility, and I live with it too. Maybe one day someone will show me a picture of a known animal with a rare disease, and I will feel foolish for not seeing it sooner. Maybe the beast has a perfectly ordinary name. Maybe all my study and searching will end with a practical explanation that takes the monster out of the memory and turns it back into a sad, dead animal after a storm. Part of me wants that. Part of me wants the peace of knowing. But another part of me fears that if the answer ever comes, it will not feel like enough. Because what we found that day was not just a strange carcass. It became a doorway for me. It opened the world of animals in a way nothing else could have. It taught me that nature could be darker, stranger, and more mysterious than any story. It made me search. It made me learn. It made me look closer at every creature, every adaptation, every disease, every hidden branch of life. That dead beast became a question that shaped the way I saw the world. And the question has never gone away. I still see it sometimes in my mind, lying there in the ditch after the storm. The pink slicked body against the mud, the long claws, the fat rat tail, the powerful muscles, the square jaw pulled open in a frozen snarl, the red gums and long fangs, the sky blue eyes rolled up in death, too human, too wide, too wrong. I see my family standing there, confused, trying to make sense of something that refused to become normal. I have spent years learning animals from every corner of the earth, from familiar pets to deep-sea creatures most people will never see, and still I have not found the answer. The beast remains in the corner of my mind. Every new animal I study, every strange disease I read about, every rare species I discover, I compare it to that thing. I am still searching this earth for answers, whether I admit it or not. Maybe one day I will find its name. Maybe I never will. And maybe, just maybe, the thing we found in our backyard ditch after that storm was the last of its kind. I once woke up in the middle of the night to someone slapping my door repeatedly. It was not a quiet tapping or the kind of knock you can half ignore when you are still asleep. It was loud, sharp, and constant. The kind of sound that cuts through sleep and pulls you out of it before your brain is ready to understand what is happening. My bedroom door was one of those thin, hollow doors that made every hit sound much bigger than it probably was. Even a light knock on that door could echo through the room. But this was not light. This sounded like an open hand slapping against it again and again, fast and hard, like someone was standing in the hallway and hitting it with purpose. At first, I did not fully wake up. I opened my eyes in the dark and lay there for a second, confused and irritated more than scared. When you wake up suddenly in the middle of the night, your mind takes a few moments to catch up with the real world. For those first few seconds, I did not think. Something is wrong. I thought, who is doing that? The room was dark, my bed was warm, and the sound was so loud that it felt almost ridiculous. It was too dramatic, too annoying, too obviously meant to get a reaction. That was why my first thought was that one of my sisters was messing with me. We were siblings, and siblings do things like that. A prank in the middle of the night would have been stupid, but not impossible. I figured one of them had decided it would be funny to scare me awake by slapping the door and then run off before I opened it. Because of that, I did not jump up right away. I was half annoyed and half determined not to give them the reaction they wanted. If they were trying to scare me, I was not going to leap out of bed like some frightened little kid. I took my time, even though the sound was still going. The slapping kept hitting the door, loud and hollow, filling the room. It sounded so close, like whoever was doing it was right on the other side. There was no mistaking the location. It was not coming from another room. It was not the house settling. It was not a branch hitting a window or a pipe in the wall. It was directly on my bedroom door. Each slap made the door give off that flat, empty sound, and because the door was so thin, it felt like the noise was happening inside my room with me. I sat up slowly, still trying to act calm. In my head, I was already picturing one of my sisters standing out there, probably with her hand over her mouth trying not to laugh. I imagined opening the door and catching her before she could run. Maybe I would yell at her. Maybe I would chase her down the hall. Maybe we would wake everyone else up and then I would get blamed for making too much noise. That was the kind of thing I expected. Annoying, but normal. I got out of bed and moved toward the door. The hallway outside my room was still dark, or at least that was what I expected. My bedroom was at the end of a hallway, which is important because there was not really anywhere nearby for someone to hide quickly. There were not many close corners or open spaces where a person could slap the door and then disappear in 1 second. If someone was out there, I should have been able to catch them, or at least hear them running away. As I reached for the door, the banging stopped. That was the first moment when something about it felt wrong. It did not fade away. It did not turn into footsteps running down the hall. It just stopped the second I was about to open the door, like whoever was out there knew my hand was on the knob. For half a second, I froze with my fingers around the handle. The silence that came after the slapping was almost worse than the sound itself. My ears were still ringing with the memory of it, but the hallway beyond the door was completely quiet. I opened the door. There was nobody there. Not just nobody standing directly in front of the door. Nobody in the hallway at all. The space outside my room was empty. The hallway stretched away from my door, dark and still, with no movement, no whispering, no sound of someone trying to hide a laugh, no footsteps, no door closing somewhere else. Nothing. I stood there, staring, waiting for my eyes to catch a shape or for someone to jump out and yell, but nothing happened. For a second, my mind refused to accept it. I had heard someone slapping the door. I had not imagined that. It had been too loud, too physical, too clear. My first thought was still that my sisters had somehow gotten away. Maybe one of them had run faster than I expected. Maybe one of them had slipped into another room. Maybe they had hidden somewhere farther down the hall. I did not want the answer to be anything else, because anything else meant I had just heard something impossible. I stepped into the hallway and looked both ways, even though there was really only one direction for someone to go. My bedroom being at the end of the hall meant the person would have had to run down the hallway to escape. There was no easy side door right beside my room. No closet they could vanish into without making noise. No open space to duck behind. If it had been one of my sisters, I should have heard feet on the floor. I should have seen a door moving. I should have caught at least some sign of them. There was nothing. That was when the fear started to creep in. It did not hit all at once at first. It came in slowly, as my brain kept failing to find an explanation. I stood in the hallway wearing whatever I had slept in, looking around like an idiot, feeling my heart beat harder. The house had that deep nighttime silence where every room feels separate from the world. The kind of silence where even breathing seems too loud. The slapping had been so aggressive, so impossible to miss, and now the whole house was acting like nothing had happened. I ran down the hall to check the rest of the home. I was not thinking clearly anymore. I just needed to find someone awake. I needed to catch my sister pretending to be asleep, or see someone moving, or find some normal reason for what had happened. I checked rooms. I listened at doors. I looked for any sign that someone had recently been up and running around, but every family member was dead asleep. Not fake asleep, not lying there trying not to laugh, actually asleep. That made me feel even more unsettled. If one of them had been pranking me, they would have had to slap my door loudly enough to wake me, stop exactly when I reached the door, somehow get away without making a sound, and then make it back to bed and look completely asleep in the few seconds it took me to check. It did not make sense. I wanted it to make sense, but it did not. I remember standing there, listening to the quiet house, feeling ridiculous and scared at the same time. Part of me still wanted to be angry because I thought maybe someone was messing with me and refusing to admit it. Another part of me knew that what I had heard did not line up with what I was seeing. The hallway was empty. The family was asleep. The sound had stopped too perfectly, and my door had sounded like someone was standing right outside it, slapping it over and over with a flat, open hand. I went back to my room, but I did not feel safe. The bedroom door, which had always just been a normal door, now felt too thin. I kept staring at it, waiting for it to start again. I thought about locking it, but even that did not feel like it would help, because whatever had slapped the door had already been on the other side and then vanished. The lock could keep out a person. It could not explain the empty hallway. I tried to go back to sleep, but it was difficult. Every small sound made me tense. Houses make noises at night, but after something like that, every creak feels meaningful. I kept hearing the slapping in my head, the hollow sound of it, the rhythm, the way it stopped as I opened the door. I remember lying there and thinking that if it happened again, I did not know whether I would open the door faster or refuse to open it at all. Both options felt awful. If I opened it, maybe I would see nobody again. If I did not open it, I would have to listen to that sound and imagine something standing there in the hallway. Eventually, the night passed. Morning came, and like most strange things that happen at night, it became harder to explain in daylight. The hallway looked normal. My bedroom door looked normal. My family was up and acting like nothing had happened, because for them, nothing had happened. I probably asked if anyone had knocked on my door or tried to scare me, and everyone said no. I do not remember every word from that morning, but I remember the feeling that nobody took it as seriously as I did. To them, it was easy to say I must have dreamed it or imagined it. But I knew I had been awake. I knew I had heard it. I knew I had walked to the door while it was happening. After a while, I stopped bringing it up. There are some stories people do not know what to do with, especially when there is no proof. I could not show anyone anything. There were no marks on the door, no video, no witness standing beside me. All I had was my memory of waking up to that sound and opening the door to an empty hallway. So I kept it mostly to myself. I remembered it, but I did not make a big deal out of it. Life moved on. Still, I never fully forgot it. For years, that memory stayed in the back of my mind. Every so often, something would bring it back. A loud knock at night, a hollow door being hid in a movie, a house going quiet after a sudden noise. I would remember being at the end of that hallway, opening the door, and finding no one there. It was one of those experiences that I could almost convince myself was nothing, until I thought too hard about the details. Then it became strange all over again. About 10 years later, I told my family the same story again. By then, enough time had passed that I did not expect anything new to come from it. I was probably telling it the way you tell an old weird memory, half serious and half ready for people to laugh it off. I described waking up in the middle of the night, hearing someone slapping my door repeatedly, thinking it was one of my sisters, opening the door and finding nobody there. I explained again that my room had been at the end of the hallway and there was nowhere nearby for someone to hide. I said I had checked the house and everyone had been asleep. That was when two of my sisters said they had gone through the same thing. They had never talked about it before. That changed the entire story for me. Up until then, I could still tell myself maybe it had been a dream, maybe I had been half asleep, maybe I had misunderstood some strange house noise. But hearing that two of my sisters had experienced the same thing made it feel much bigger. It meant it was not just me. It meant that whatever happened to my door may have happened to theirs too. It meant that for years, we had each carried our own version of the same frightening memory and never said anything. I remember feeling that cold shock you get when a private fear suddenly becomes shared. It is not comforting exactly, even though it proves you were not alone. In some ways, it is worse when something strange happens only to you. There is always the chance that your mind made it up. But when other people say they experienced the same thing in the same house, the explanation becomes harder to dismiss. It becomes a pattern. My sisters describe the same kind of thing. Someone at the door in the middle of the night. Loud slapping or banging. The kind of sound that wakes you up and makes you think a real person is standing right outside. Then, when they checked, nobody was there. No one running away. No one hiding. No explanation. They had never mentioned it. Maybe for the same reason I had not wanted to talk about mine too much. It sounded too strange. It sounded like something people would dismiss. So they kept it to themselves. Learning that made me rethink the house. Not in a dramatic way where I suddenly believed every shadow had been a ghost, but in a quiet way. I started thinking about the hallway, the doors, the silence at night. I wondered how many times something had happened and none of us had said anything. I wondered if my parents had ever heard anything. I wondered if the house had always had a strange feeling and we had just grown used to it because it was home. Then there was the graveyard. We lived a couple 100 feet away from a graveyard. It was close enough that you always knew it was there, even if you did not think about it every day. During the day, a graveyard nearby can seem peaceful or even ordinary after a while. It becomes part of the neighborhood. You drive past it, walk near it, see the stones and trees and fences, and it stops feeling scary. But at night, when you are thinking about invisible hands slapping bedroom doors, the idea of living that close to a graveyard starts to feel different. I am not saying the graveyard caused it. I do not know that. Maybe it had nothing to do with anything. Maybe the door slapping was some strange house sound. Or maybe all three of us had separate half-asleep experiences that happened to be similar. Maybe the graveyard only made the story feel creepier because people naturally connect death and ghosts in their minds. I understand that. I am not trying to claim I know for sure what happened. But when you put it all together, it is hard not to wonder. A house near a graveyard. Kids waking up at different times over the years to someone slapping their bedroom doors. Doors opening to empty hallways. No place nearby for anyone to hide. Family members asleep. No one talking about it until years later, only to find out it had happened to more than one of us. That is not easy to laugh off. The sound itself is the part I can never fully explain away. If it had been a single knock, maybe I could believe it was the house settling. If it had been a soft tapping, maybe it could have been something in the walls. If it had been far away, maybe it could have been a neighbor or a branch or some normal nighttime noise, but this was repeated slapping on my door. It was physical. It had rhythm. It was close. It was the loudest thing I had ever heard in that room. My door was hollow, and the sound of a hand hitting it was unmistakable. And the timing was too perfect. It stopped as I opened the door, not a few seconds before, not after footsteps ran away. It stopped right as I was opening it, like whoever or whatever was on the other side did not want to be seen. That is the detail that stays with me most. Something wanted my attention, but not enough to show itself. Or maybe it wanted to scare me. Or maybe there was no intention at all, just some strange echo of something that had no body behind it. I do not know. All I know is that the door was being hit, and when I opened it, the hallway was empty. Sometimes I try to imagine a normal explanation. Maybe one of my sisters really did prank me and lied about it for years, but that does not explain why two of them later said it happened to them too. Maybe sleep made the sound feel closer than it was. But I was awake enough to get up and open the door while it was happening. Maybe the sound came from inside the wall or from the house shifting, and the hollow door made it seem like slapping. But I know what a hand on a hollow door sounds like. That was what I heard. Maybe there are things that happen in certain houses that never get explained because they are too small for anyone outside the house to care about. A door slaps in the night. A child wakes up. The hallway is empty. A family sleeps. Years pass. Then someone tells the story and finds out they were not the only one. It is not enough to prove anything, but it is enough to stay with you. I still think about that hallway sometimes. I think about myself standing there, younger and confused, expecting to catch one of my sisters and finding only darkness. I think about how quickly my confidence disappeared once I realized there was nowhere someone could have gone. I think about running down the hall and checking the house, desperate to find any normal movement, any sign of a person awake. I think about the silence of my family sleeping and how strange it felt that something so loud had woken only me. And now I think about my sisters too, waking up in their own rooms to the same kind of sound, opening their own doors, finding their own empty hallways, and choosing not to say anything. That part makes me sad in a way. We were all in the same house, experiencing something frightening, and none of us knew the others had gone through it. Each of us thought we were alone with our own strange memory. Maybe if we had talked about it back then, we would have understood the house differently. Maybe we would have been more afraid. Maybe we would have laughed and blamed each other. Maybe we would have started listening more closely at night and scared ourselves even worse. I do not know. Maybe it is better that we did not know until years later. But knowing now has made the memory harder to dismiss. I do not claim to know what was on the other side of my door that night. I do not know if it was connected to the graveyard or the house or something else entirely. I do not know if it was supernatural or just one of those strange things that happens and never gets explained. But I know I woke up to the sound of someone slapping my door over and over in the middle of the night. I know the sound stopped when I opened the door. I know there was nobody there. I know my room was at the end of a hallway with almost nowhere for someone to hide. I know my family was asleep. And I know that 10 years later, two of my sisters told me the same thing had happened to them. We lived a couple 100 feet away from a graveyard. Who the hell knows what it was? When I was 19, I saw what looked like a red dot in the sky. I was driving my truck at the time, just heading home like it was any other night. I do not remember thinking anything strange was about to happen. It was one of those ordinary drives where your mind is half on the road and half on getting home, especially when you are tired. At that age, I spent a lot of time driving around, and a red light in the sky was not something I immediately thought much about. It caught my attention because it looked a little odd, but it was not enough at first to make me panic or pull over. It was just a small red dot above me, hanging there or moving in a way I could not fully understand in the moment. The sky was dark enough that the red dot stood out. It was not like looking at a plane with normal blinking lights, at least not from what I remember. It did not have the usual pattern of aircraft lights, and it did not look like a tower or anything fixed in place. It was just there, small and red, and my eyes kept wanting to go back to it, even though I was trying to focus on the road. When you are driving at night, any unusual light in the sky can pull your attention for a second. You tell yourself not to stare because you need to watch where you are going, but your brain still notices it and tries to figure it out. I remember seeing it and wondering, maybe only for a moment, what it was. Then, all of a sudden, there was a flash. It was not just a flash somewhere in the distance. It felt like the flash hit my eyes. 1 second, I was looking at the road and noticing that red dot, and the next, bright light exploded across my vision. It happened so fast that I did not have time to react. There was no warning sound before it, no slow buildup, no time to think. Something is coming. It was just instant, a blast of light, like my eyes had been filled with white. For a moment, I could not see anything at all. At the same time, my whole truck shook. It was violent enough that I knew something had hit me, or at least hit the truck. This was not a small rock bouncing off the road, not a branch tapping the windshield, not normal road vibration. The whole vehicle jolted, and my body reacted before my mind could understand what was happening. Then I heard the windshield crack. That sound is hard to forget, especially when it happens right in front of your face while you are moving. Glass cracking has a sharp, sickening sound to it, and hearing it while temporarily blinded made the fear 100 times worse. For a few seconds, I could not see where I was going. That was the scariest part in the moment. Whatever had hit the truck was terrifying, but not being able to see the road while still driving was immediate danger. I was temporarily blinded from the flash, and I damn near wrecked because I had no idea exactly where I was. My eyes were trying to recover, but everything was just light, blur, and confusion. I had my hands on the wheel, trying to keep the truck straight, trying not to panic, trying to remember where the road was from the last thing I had seen before the flash. There's a specific kind of fear that hits when you are behind the wheel and suddenly lose vision. You know that even one wrong movement can put you in a ditch, into another lane, into a tree, or into something else before you can stop it. I do not know how long the blindness lasted. It probably was not long in actual time, but it felt long enough. A few seconds is a lifetime when you are driving and cannot see. My heart was pounding, and I was probably gripping the steering wheel too hard. I do not remember if I hit the brakes hard or just slowed down as much as I could while trying to stay in control. I only remember fighting to keep the truck on the road while waiting for my eyesight to come back. Every part of me was tense. I was waiting for impact, waiting to feel the tires leave the road, waiting for something worse to happen. Then my vision started coming back. At first it was not clear. It came back in pieces, blurry and dark, with spots from the flash still burned into my eyes. I could make out enough to keep going, but I was shaken. I knew something had happened to the truck, but I could not fully inspect it right there. It was dark. I was tired, and I just wanted to get home. I was only about 5 minutes away, so once I could see again, I kept driving. Looking back, maybe I should have pulled over right away. Maybe I should have gotten out and checked the damage. But in that moment, I did not have the energy or the visibility to make sense of anything. I was more focused on getting home without crashing. The rest of the drive felt unreal. I kept replaying the flash in my mind. I kept thinking about the red dot. I kept listening to the truck, wondering if something was wrong under the hood, wondering if the windshield would crack more, wondering what had hit me. It is strange how quickly an ordinary night can turn into something you cannot explain. 5 minutes earlier, I had just been driving home. Now I was trying to understand why my truck had shaken like it had been struck by something from above, and why my windshield had cracked after a flash of light from the sky. When I got home, I parked the truck. It was still dark, and I could not see much outside. I was tired as hell, and I did not feel like trying to inspect the damage with no proper light. I knew the windshield was cracked, and I knew the truck had been hit hard, but I could not fully tell what I was looking at in the dark. So I left it for the morning. That might sound strange, but at the time I was exhausted and still rattled. I had made it home alive, and that was all I could process. I went inside, probably still trying to convince myself that there would be some normal explanation when the sun came up. When I woke up in the morning, I went out to check the truck. That was when I realized how serious it had been. The hood had a huge dent in it. Not a little ding, not a scratch, not something that looked like road debris had bounced up from another vehicle. A huge dent. Something had hit the hood with real force. Seeing it in daylight made my stomach drop because it showed me that whatever happened the night before was not just in my head. The flash, the shake, the cracked windshield, all of it had left physical proof. Something had struck the truck hard enough to dent the hood badly. Then I noticed the paint. There was a section about 6 inches across where the paint had been burned off. Not scraped off, burned off. The metal underneath was discolored, blue and purple, the way steel looks when it has been heated. That was the part that made it impossible to explain as a normal rock or piece of debris. A rock might dent a hood. A piece of metal from the road might crack glass. But what hits a truck with enough heat to burn the paint away and leave the metal looking like it had been heated? The color of the metal was not normal damage. It looked like something extremely hot had touched it. I checked the windshield too. It had a small section where the outer layer of glass was gone and the plastic layer in the middle was melted. That detail still bothers me when I think about it. Windshields are layered. They are made to crack and hold together because of that plastic layer inside. Whatever hit my truck did not just crack it from impact. It damaged it with heat. It took off part of the outer glass and melted the layer underneath. That is not the kind of thing you expect from gravel, a falling branch, or something kicked up from the road. It had both force and heat. That was when the red dot in the sky came back into my mind even stronger. I had seen the red dot before the flash. Then something flashed bright enough to temporarily blind me, shook the truck, cracked the windshield, dented the hood, burned paint off a 6-inch section, discolored the metal, and melted part of the windshield's inner layer. The sequence made me think it had to have come from above, and the only explanation I could come up with was that it had been a meteor. I know that sounds wild, but I have never been able to come up with anything else that fits. A meteor would explain the light. It would explain the heat. It would explain the speed and energy. It would explain why it seemed to come from the sky. Small meteors can burn as they fall, and if a piece made it low enough and hit something, I can imagine it leaving the kind of damage I saw. I am not an expert, but when I looked at that hood and windshield, I could not think of any normal road hazard that would do that. It was not just impact damage. It was burned, heated, melted damage. The idea that a meteor might have hit my truck is both incredible and terrifying. People talk about meteors like they are things you watch from far away, streaking across the sky during a shower. You make a wish, or you point them out to someone, or you think about how beautiful the sky is. You do not expect one to hit your vehicle while you are driving home. You do not expect something from space, even a small piece, to come down at the exact time and place where you happen to be on the road. The odds feel impossible, but standing there looking at the damage the impossible explanation, felt more reasonable than anything else. I have thought about other possibilities over the years. Maybe something fell off another vehicle. Maybe it was a piece of machinery, metal, or debris from the road. But I do not remember another vehicle right there causing it. And debris from the road would not explain the flash in the sky or the heat damage. Maybe something electrical happened, like a power line or some kind of arc. But I do not remember being near anything that would explain that either. Maybe someone threw something, but what could a person throw that would create a flash? Burn paint, heat the metal blue and purple, crack the windshield, and melt the plastic layer? None of it works. The heat is the part that keeps me coming back to the meteor idea. Metal turning blue and purple from heat is not subtle. Burned paint is not subtle. Melted windshield plastic is not subtle. Something extremely hot hit the truck. And it hit with enough energy to dent the hood and crack the windshield. A normal object might do one of those things. A hot object might burn. A hard object might dent. But something that is hot, fast, and powerful enough to do all of it is not common. That is why I have never been able to let go of the meteor explanation. I also think about how close it came to being much worse. If the object had hit a little higher, a little lower, or a little farther back, it could have gone through the windshield, hit me, or caused me to lose control completely. I was temporarily blinded and nearly wrecked as it was. If there had been another car coming, a curve in the road, a ditch, a tree, or anything else in the wrong place, the story might have ended very differently. The dent and burned paint were shocking in the morning, but the scariest part is that I had been inside the truck when it happened, moving down the road, unable to see for those few seconds. At the time, I was just tired and trying to get home. I did not have the sense to stop and really process it. But later, looking at the damage in daylight, I understood that something powerful had happened inches away from me. There is something deeply unsettling about seeing evidence after the fact. During the event, everything happened too fast. Flash, shake, crack, blindness, panic, then keep driving. In the morning, the damage was still there, calm and silent, waiting for me to understand it. The truck was proof that the night before had not been a dream or an exaggeration. I wish I had taken more photos or had someone examine it properly. I wish I had been able to find the object or fragment that hit the truck, if there was one. Maybe it bounced away. Maybe it broke apart. Maybe it was small and ended up somewhere on the road where I would never find it. If it really was a meteorite, I will always wonder if a piece of it was left behind. But at the time, I was 19. I was not thinking like that. I was just trying to understand what had happened to my truck and why it looked like something had hit it with fire. The memory has stayed with me because it started with something so small, a red dot in the sky. That is all. If I had looked away, I might not have even noticed it. Then came the flash, the violent shake, the cracked windshield, and the fear of driving blind. Then came the morning discovery, the huge dent, the burned paint, the blue and purple metal, the missing outer layer of windshield glass, and the melted plastic inside. All from something that seemed to come out of nowhere. I know people might doubt it. I would probably doubt it too if someone told me the same story. It sounds like something you would hear and immediately try to explain away. But I saw the red dot. I felt the truck shake. I lost my vision for those seconds. I saw the cracked windshield. And in the morning, I saw the damage with my own eyes. Whatever it was, it hit my truck with heat and force unlike anything I have ever experienced. I still believe it had to have been a meteor. I have never come up with anything else that could explain the flash, the impact, the burned paint, the heated metal, and the melted windshield layer all at once. Maybe someone who knows more about meteors, aircraft debris, electrical arcs, or strange road incidents could suggest something else. But from what I saw and what happened, a meteor is the only thing that makes sense to me. When I was 19, I saw a red dot in the sky, and moments later, a flash blinded me. My truck shook and my windshield cracked. I almost wrecked because I could not see. I made it home, too tired and blind in the darkness to inspect everything properly. The next morning, I found a huge dent in the hood, a burned 6-inch section where the paint was gone, metal turned blue and purple from heat, and a section of windshield where the outer glass was gone and the plastic layer had melted. Something hit my truck that night, and whatever it was, it came with serious heat and energy. To this day, the only explanation I have is that a meteor hit me while I was driving. I was sitting passenger in my ex-girlfriend's car. I say ex, but we had only broken up a few hours before, so everything still felt fresh and raw in that way where you do not really know what to do with yourself. We were not ready to go home, but we also did not know what else to say. So we ended up going on an aimless drive around Vancouver at around 2 a.m., talking, crying, going quiet, then talking again. It was one of those late-night drives that does not really have a destination. You are just moving, because sitting still would make everything feel too final. The car becomes the only place where the conversation can keep going, even if neither person knows what they are hoping to fix. It was Christmas Eve, too, which made the whole thing feel even more miserable and strange. The timing was terrible, and I knew it. Most people were home with family, asleep, wrapping presents, drinking, watching movies, or doing whatever people do on Christmas Eve night. But we were driving through the city after ending our relationship, both of us emotionally exhausted, going nowhere in particular. There was no snow, but it was cold, near freezing or right at freezing, and the streets had that hard winter emptiness to them. The roads looked damp and dark, the air looked sharp, and everything felt closed. Vancouver can be busy and alive in a lot of areas, even late, but that night it felt like the city had been emptied out, just for us. There was not a single other car or person anywhere around us. I mean that in the most literal way. No headlights coming toward us, no taillights ahead, no people walking home, no buses passing, no cyclists, no one standing outside smoking, no one waiting at a light. Nothing. The city felt paused. It felt like we were in limbo, caught somewhere between the end of one part of life and the beginning of whatever came next. Maybe the breakup made everything feel more unreal, but the streets really were that empty. It was like the whole city had stepped away, leaving only us, the car, and the cold. We drove without much of a plan, taking streets we probably would not have bothered with during a normal night. At some point, we passed through a big industrial area. It was dimly lit, the kind of place that feels almost forgotten after dark. Industrial areas already have a strange atmosphere at night because they are built for work, not for comfort. During the day, they might be full of trucks, forklifts, workers, machines, and noise. But at 2 a.m., on Christmas Eve, everything was shut down. Warehouses sat dark and silent. Concrete lots stretched empty behind fences. Loading docks looked abandoned. Streetlights gave off weak pools of light that did not reach very far. The whole place felt too large and too quiet. We were going over an overpass on some irrelevant back street, not a main road, not somewhere you would expect to see anything interesting. It was the kind of road people use only when they have a reason to be there, and at that hour, nobody had a reason. The overpass gave me a view down into the lots and streets below. I was not looking for anything in particular. I was probably staring out the window because I did not know what to say anymore. When you are in the passenger seat during a difficult conversation, Sometimes you look outside just so you do not have to keep looking at the person beside you. My mind was heavy, and the cold city outside matched the mood inside the car. Then I saw him. Down below, maybe 50 meters away, there was a man standing in the middle of an abandoned concrete lot. He was not near a building entrance, not on a sidewalk, not beside a car, not with anyone else. He was just there, alone, in a big, empty lot surrounded by old warehouses. And he was dressed in a bowler hat and a full suit. At first, my brain did not even know what it was looking at. The outfit was so wrong for the place and time that it took a moment to register. A man in a suit might make sense in a downtown area, outside a hotel or restaurant, or leaving some formal event. But this was not that. This was a dimly lit industrial area, freezing cold, empty after 2 a.m. on Christmas Eve. There was no reason for a man in a full suit and bowler hat to be standing there alone. And then I realized he was not just standing there. He was dancing. Not modern dancing, not stumbling around, not moving like someone drunk or lost. He was dancing in this old-timey style with a cane, like something from a silent film or a stage routine from another era. His movements looked practiced, almost choreographed. It had that strange showman quality, like he was performing for an audience that was not there. He was not facing the road. At least not at first. He was turned away from us, doing this little routine in the middle of the concrete lot, with nothing around him but old warehouses and cold darkness. The whole thing was brief because we were moving, but it burned into my mind immediately. It was so out of place that even now I can picture it. The bowler hat, the suit, the cane, the empty lot, the industrial buildings, the cold night, and that bizarre old-fashioned dance. It looked almost like a scene that had accidentally slipped out of another time and landed in the wrong place. There was no music, at least none that I could hear from inside the car. No crowd, no camera crew, no friends laughing nearby, just one man performing in the dark. Then, as we zipped by, I swear he stopped. His movement changed suddenly. He seemed to freeze in the middle of whatever routine he was doing, and then he darted his head right up toward us. It was fast and sharp, not a slow glance like someone casually noticing a passing car. It was like he knew exactly where we were the second we saw him. One moment he was facing away, dancing for no one, and the next his head snapped up toward the overpass, toward the car, toward us. That quick movement made my stomach drop more than the dancing itself. Until then, it could have been strange, but maybe harmless. That look made it feel like we had been caught watching something we were not supposed to see. Normally, I would say he was probably homeless or unwell. It was Vancouver, after all. You can see all kinds of strange things in a city, especially late at night. People in crisis, people high, people living outside, people doing things that do not make sense to anyone else. That is a real possibility, and I understand it. But this did not feel like that. He did not look homeless. His suit looked fitted, not like random clothes thrown together. The whole thing looked too put together, too deliberate. The cane, the bowler hat, the suit, the old-timey dancing, it all looked like a planned act. But if it was an act, who was it for? There was no one around. That is what made it so wrong. I looked for a car nearby, because maybe someone had driven him there. I did not see one. I looked for other people, maybe a group filming something, maybe friends standing out of view, maybe some kind of weird Christmas Eve art project. I saw no one. The lot was empty. The surrounding warehouses looked closed and dark. There was no lighting setup, no equipment, no signs of a film shoot, no audience, no reason for a man to be dressed that way and dancing there at 2 in the morning. It was just him. The temperature bothered me too. It was near freezing. If he had been homeless or stuck outside, I do not understand how he could have survived the night dressed like that. Unless there was more to the situation than we could see. A suit is not enough for that cold. Not if you are standing around outside in an exposed industrial lot. And he was not walking toward shelter or trying to stay warm. He was dancing, performing, moving like he had some purpose that made sense only to him. The whole thing gave me the creeps even though we were in a car and technically safe. That is the strange part. We were not standing in the lot with him. We were not close enough for him to touch us. We were moving past on an overpass, and within seconds, he was behind us. But I still felt unsafe, like something about seeing him had reached into the car. The emotional state I was already in probably made it worse. I was exhausted from the breakup, sad, raw, and half detached from reality because of the hour and the empty city. Then, this strange figure appeared below us like something out of a nightmare. It felt like the night had decided to show us one more thing we were not ready for. He looked like a weird Babadook-type man. I do not mean exactly like the movie character, but that was the feeling. The dark, formal clothes, the hat, the old-fashioned style, the wrongness of him. He looked like a person and a character at the same time, like someone dressed up as a figure from a story children should not hear. Seeing him dance alone in that empty lot made him feel less like a random man and more like a symbol of something. That sounds dramatic, but in the moment it felt deeply unsettling. I do not remember if I said anything right away. I was probably too confused at first. My mind was trying to decide whether it had really seen what it saw. Sometimes when you are passing something quickly in a car, your brain only catches pieces, and you have to reconstruct the image after. But this was clear enough. A man. Bowler hat. Suit, cane, dancing, empty concrete lot, old warehouses. No one else. Then that sudden head snap toward us. Those details were not blurry. They were too specific. The breakup conversation felt different after that. It is hard to keep crying about your relationship in the same way after you see something like that. The mood in the car shifted. We were still sad, still in our own emotional mess, but now there was this additional layer of unease. The empty streets no longer felt like a quiet place for heartbreak. They felt like a place where impossible things could be waiting just out of view. The city had already felt like limbo, but after seeing him, that feeling became stronger. It was like we had driven into a version of Vancouver that existed only at that hour, when everyone else was gone. I have tried to explain it many times in my own head. Maybe he was part of a performance art piece. Vancouver has artists, strange events, and people doing weird things. Maybe someone was filming from a hidden angle. Maybe there was a music video, a short film, or some student project happening in that industrial lot. But again, there were no lights, no crew, no car, no equipment, and no other people that I could see. It was also Christmas Eve at 2 a.m. in near freezing weather. That seems like a strange time for anyone to be filming a quiet dance routine alone in an industrial lot. Maybe he was mentally unwell, but dressed well. That is possible, too. People do all kinds of things for reasons no one else understands. Maybe he had somewhere nearby to go. Maybe he liked dressing that way. Maybe he was dancing because he wanted to. That is the most practical explanation, and I know it could be true. But it does not erase how wrong it felt to see him there. The clothing, the cane, the way the dance looked practiced, the empty area, and the way his head snapped up toward us all made it feel like more than just a random person acting strangely. Maybe we caught him in the middle of some private ritual, performance, or breakdown. Maybe he thought he was alone and reacted sharply because he realized someone had seen him. That would explain the head movement, at least. But it still leaves the question of why he was there at all, in that place, at that hour, dressed like that, with no visible way he had arrived or planned to leave. The thing that sticks with me most is the feeling of being noticed. If he had just kept dancing as we passed, the memory would still be weird, but maybe less frightening. It would be something strange we saw from a distance. But the way he seemed to stop and look up at us made it feel personal, like the moment we saw him, he saw us seeing him. That kind of instant awareness is unsettling. We were above him, moving fast, in a car, on an overpass. There should have been no reason for him to react so sharply. And yet, it felt like he did. I also remember how empty the entire area was. That emptiness is part of why the memory works its way under my skin. Cities are full of people, but in that industrial pocket at that hour, there was nobody. Empty streets, closed warehouses, no cars, no movement, no warmth. No signs of life except one man in old-fashioned clothes dancing with a cane in the middle of a concrete lot. It felt like seeing a stage after the audience has left, but the performer is still there, continuing the act for something unseen. Maybe if it had happened on any other night, it would not have affected me as much. But Christmas Eve made it stranger. A night associated with warmth, family, lights, and people being together had turned into this cold, empty, emotionally wrecked drive through the city after a breakup. Then, in the middle of that loneliness, we saw him. A man dressed like he belonged in another century, dancing alone where no one should be dancing. It fit the mood too perfectly in the worst possible way, like the city was reflecting the broken, unreal feeling inside the car. We kept driving, and he was gone from view within seconds. We did not turn around. I do not think either of us wanted to. There are some things you see and immediately know you do not need a closer look. Even if part of your mind wants an explanation, another part says to keep moving. That was one of those moments. We were in a car, safe and passing by, and that was enough. I did not want to see where he went. I did not want to know if he was still dancing. I did not want to find out whether there were others hidden in the dark around him. I just wanted distance between us and that lot. I still think about him sometimes. I wonder if he was real in the ordinary sense. I wonder if someone else saw him that night. I wonder if he was just a man having a strange private moment, or if there was something more to it. I wonder where he went after we passed. Did he keep dancing? Did he walk away into the industrial streets? Did he get into a car we somehow missed? Did he vanish into one of the warehouses? I have no idea. We only saw a few seconds, but those few seconds were enough. It was not the scariest thing in the world in a direct danger sense. He did not chase us. He did not appear in the road. He did not come near the car. But it gave me the heebie-jeebies in a way I cannot fully explain. It was the wrong person in the wrong place at the wrong time, doing the wrong thing. A man in a bowler hat and full suit dancing old-timey with a cane in a deserted industrial lot on Christmas Eve at 2 in the morning, with no car, no audience, no visible shelter, and no reason to be there. Then he stopped and snapped his head up toward us as we passed. Even now, the memory feels less like a random late-night sighting and more like something we accidentally drove past while the rest of the city was asleep. We were already in a strange, emotional place, newly broken up, crying and talking through the empty streets of Vancouver. The city felt like limbo that night. And in the middle of that limbo, under dim industrial lights, there was that weird, old-fashioned man dancing alone with a cane, like he belonged to some other world that we were never supposed to notice. Quick interruption. I'll keep it short. A lot of people pass through here once and never come back. But the ones who hit subscribe, they're the regulars now. The ones who show up every single night without fail. If you'd like to be one of them, the button's right there. Turn the bell on too, and you'll never have to wonder when the next one drops. That's everything. Story's still going. Let's get back to it. When I was around 11 or 12, my best friend and I used to do something that, looking back now, makes me feel sick to my stomach. At the time, we did not fully understand how dangerous it was. We were kids, old enough to think we knew how the world worked, but still young enough to make choices that were incredibly reckless. We had that false kind of confidence children sometimes have, especially when they have done something risky once or twice, and nothing bad has happened. After a while, danger starts to feel less like danger and more like a story adults tell to scare you. That is exactly where my mind was back then. It was summer, and there was a school bus that would take middle schoolers and people who could not drive through Topanga Canyon and drop them off at Topanga Beach, near Pacific Coast Highway. The bus drove back and forth all day, making the same loop over and over until around 4 p.m. or so. It was one of those simple summer routines. You could go down to the beach, hang out for a while, and then catch the bus back when it came around again. For kids our age, it felt like freedom. We did not have cars, we did not have much money, and we did not have adults driving us everywhere. That bus gave us a way to move around on our own. And because of that, it felt almost like a ticket into independence. Topanga Canyon itself was the kind of place that could feel beautiful and isolated at the same time. The road curved through hills and dry brush, with trees and cliffs and stretches, where it felt like you were far away from everything, even though Los Angeles and the coast were not that far. During the day, it could be sunny and pretty, with that dusty California summer feeling in the air. But it was still a canyon road, narrow in places, with blind curves and long stretches where you were very aware that if something went wrong, there might not be many people around to help. At 11 or 12, I noticed the beauty more than the isolation. As an adult, I think about the isolation more than anything else. One day, my best friend and I were at the beach, or headed back from the beach, and we did not feel like waiting for the bus. The bus would come back around in about 20 minutes, which now sounds like nothing. 20 minutes is such a short amount of time. You can sit on a curb, talk, complain about being hot, and wait. But when you are 11 or 12, 20 minutes can feel like forever. We were impatient. We wanted to go. We wanted to get moving. We thought we were clever and brave and independent. So we decided we would hitchhike instead. I know how insane that sounds now. Two young girls sticking their thumbs out on a canyon road, getting into cars with strangers because we did not want to wait for a bus. It makes me angry at my younger self, but also sad, because I remember how normal it felt to us after a while. The first time, I was nervous. I knew enough to worry that someone dangerous might pick us up. I had heard the warnings, even if I did not understand them the way I do now. A stranger could take us somewhere else. A stranger could hurt us. A stranger could drive away with us, and nobody would know where we had gone. Those thoughts were in my head, but they were not strong enough to stop me. The first few times we did it, nothing bad happened. That was the problem. Someone would pull over, we would climb in, they would drive us where we wanted to go, and then we would get out. No one tried anything. No one drove away in the wrong direction. No one acted scary. So instead of thinking we were lucky, I started thinking, this is fine. That is how kids get comfortable with danger. The world gives you a few harmless outcomes, and your brain turns them into proof that nothing bad will happen. Each time we got away with it, the fear got smaller. Hitchhiking stopped feeling like a terrible idea and started feeling like just another way to get around. Then one day, we did it again. We stuck our thumbs out on the side of the road waiting for someone to stop. I do not remember the exact weather or what we were wearing or what we had been talking about before that moment, but I remember the truck. A beat-up truck pulled up for us. It was old and rough-looking, the kind of truck that already seemed like it had been through a hard life. It was not shiny or clean. It looked worn down, dusty, and used. At that age, I did not know much about cars, but I remember thinking it did not look nice. Still, it stopped, and by then we were used to taking rides from strangers, so we got in. The front seat was one long bench seat that went all the way from the driver's side to the passenger side. My best friend and I both climbed into the front, and I ended up sitting in the middle. That meant I was close to the driver, closer than I wanted to be once I really looked at him. There was a stick shift sticking up, and I had to keep my knees angled to the side so I would not be in the way. My best friend sat on the passenger side, pressed near the door, and I was between her and him, squeezed into that middle spot with nowhere to really move. At first, I tried to act normal. We had done this before. The truck had stopped. We were getting a ride. Everything was supposed to be fine. The engine rumbled, the truck started moving, and we pulled away. But once we were driving, I took a quick look at the driver, and that was when my comfort began to crack. He looked rough, not just tired, but really worn down. His face looked beat up, like life had not been kind to him. He looked like he had not showered in days. His hair and face were scraggly, and there was something about him that made me nervous right away. I know now that this was not fair. People can look rough for all kinds of reasons. Poverty, hard work, injury, bad luck, illness, or simply having no one to help them. A person's appearance does not make them dangerous. But I was a child, and I was sitting in a stranger's truck in the middle of a canyon, and the first real look I got at him made my stomach tighten. I shifted closer to my best friend. It was a small movement, the kind you hope no one notices. I just moved a little to the side, away from him, toward her. I wanted the comfort of being closer to someone I knew. I told myself not to panic. He was probably just a guy giving us a ride. He had not done anything wrong. He was driving in the right direction. But that old nervous feeling came back, the one I had felt the first time we ever hitchhiked. The feeling that said, you are in a car with a stranger, and if he decides to do something else, you have no control. Then I looked over at my best friend. She was staring downward toward the area near the stick shift, and her face had changed. She had this look of horror on her face, like she was trying not to react, but could not hide what she was seeing. She did not say anything. She did not grab me. She just stared. The sight of her expression scared me before I even knew what she was looking at. When someone you trust suddenly looks terrified, your body reacts. I felt a cold rush move through me. I knew I had to see what she was seeing, but I also did not want to. I carefully glanced down. The man was missing an arm. But where his arm should have been, there was this metal contraption. It was dinged up and beat up, like the rest of him and the truck. It did not look smooth or modern or medical in the way I would expect now. To my young eyes, it looked strange and frightening, almost homemade, like something from a nightmare. At the end of it was a shape that looked like a really large bottle opener. That is the best way I can describe what my child brain saw. It looked like a big metal hook or opener attached where his arm should have been. The second I saw it, real terror hit me. I did not think, this man has a disability. I did not think, he has probably been through something terrible. I did not think, he is just driving us where we asked to go. I was 11 or 12, and my mind went straight to the worst possible place. I thought this was the man we had always been warned about, the dangerous stranger, the person who was going to drive away somewhere else, the person who was going to murder us. I thought we had finally made the mistake that all those adult warnings had been about. And now we were trapped in a beat-up truck with a man who looked scary to me and had a metal hook-like arm. I have never felt fear like that before, or maybe since. It was not just being nervous. It was not a little chill or a quick scare. It was full-body terror. I started shaking. I felt like I might pee my pants. My mouth went dry. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like it was hitting my ribs from the inside. I could barely breathe normally. I did not want to look at him again. I did not want to look at his arm. I did not want him to notice that we had seen it, or that we were scared. I just sat there in the middle of the bench seat, keeping my knees away from the stick shift, trying to make myself as still and small as possible. The truck kept moving through the canyon. That ride probably did not last very long, but in my memory it feels stretched out, like time slowed down and every second became heavy. I remember watching the road, or maybe staring straight ahead without really seeing it. I remember feeling my best friend beside me, just as tense and quiet as I was. Neither of us spoke. We did not have to. I could feel her fear the same way I could feel my own. We were both trapped in the same thought. What if he does not take us where we are supposed to go? Every curve in the road felt like a test. Every moment the truck kept going in the right direction gave me a little hope, but not enough to calm me down. I kept waiting for him to turn somewhere else. I kept imagining him passing the place where the bus would have dropped us off and continuing down some road we did not know. I imagined being unable to get out. I imagined trying to open the door while the truck was moving. I imagined screaming and nobody hearing us because we were in the canyon. My mind was doing what fear does. It was writing endings before anything had actually happened. The man did not threaten us. He did not say anything horrible. He did not reach for us. He did not turn off the road or lock the doors or act like the monster my mind had created. He just drove. But at that age, I could not separate his actual behavior from the terror I had built around him. To me, his rough appearance, the truck, the metal arm, the isolated road, and the fact that we were hitchhiking all fused into one terrible certainty. I was sure we were in danger. I remember being afraid to look at his face. I was afraid that if I looked, he would look back and know what I was thinking. I was afraid of making him angry. I was afraid of accidentally giving him a reason to hurt us. So I kept my eyes away from him. I looked ahead, or down, or toward my best friend. I tried to breathe quietly. I tried not to shake too much. I tried to pretend I was not scared, even though I know there's no way I hid it completely. Then, after what felt like forever, he dropped us off exactly where the bus would have dropped us off. He did not drive us somewhere else. He did not hurt us. He did not even scare us on purpose, as far as I could tell. He simply pulled over and let us out at the right place. The ride ended the way every other hitchhiking ride had ended, with us climbing out of the vehicle and the driver leaving. But this time, nothing felt normal. My body still felt full of fear, and my legs probably felt weak when I stepped out of the truck. The truck drove away. My best friend and I stood there, and I could tell she had been just as scared as I was. She had that shaken look, the kind you get when you have been holding yourself together and only realize afterward how frightened you really were. We did not need to say it. We both knew. We had both thought the same thing. We had both sat there in silence, convinced in our own heads that we might not make it out of that truck. And then we never talked about it. That is one of the strangest parts to me now. We did not sit down and process it. We did not say, "Oh my God, I thought we were going to die." We did not laugh it off. We did not cry. We did not tell each other how scared we had been. We just let it sit between us, unspoken, maybe because we were embarrassed. Maybe because saying it out loud would have made it too real. Maybe because part of us knew we had been wrong to be so scared of him, and another part still could not let go of the fear. At 11 or 12, you do not always have the words for complicated feelings like that. So we did what kids often do. We buried it, but we never hitchhiked again. That part was clear. Whatever confidence we had built from the earlier rides was gone. That one ride destroyed it completely. It did not matter that he had dropped us off safely. It did not matter that nothing bad had happened. We had finally felt the full weight of what could happen when you get into a stranger's vehicle. And that was enough. We did not need another lesson. We waited for the bus after that. 20 minutes did not feel like forever anymore. 20 minutes felt safe. Looking back now, I feel bad about being so scared of that man. I really do. As an adult, I can see the situation with more compassion. He was probably just someone who had lived a hard life. Maybe he had been in an accident. Maybe he had lost his arm in some terrible way. Maybe the metal contraption was a tool he used every day just to get by. Maybe people stared at him all the time. Maybe he knew we were scared and said nothing because he was used to that reaction. That thought makes me feel ashamed. He stopped to help two kids get where they were going, and we sat there thinking of him like a monster. That is not fair to him, but at the same time, I cannot pretend the fear was not real. I cannot rewrite my own body's reaction. I was a child in a stranger's truck on a canyon road, sitting right next to a man who looked frightening to me at that age, with a strange metal attachment where his arm should have been. I did not have the life experience to understand him as a person with pain, history, and maybe kindness. I only had fear, warnings, and the sudden realization that my best friend and I had put ourselves in a situation where we had almost no control. That fear was powerful because it was not only about him, it was about finally understanding the danger of what we had been doing. Until that ride, hitchhiking had felt like a shortcut. A little risky, yes, but mostly harmless because nothing had gone wrong. In that truck, for the first time, I truly understood that we were not in charge once we got into someone else's vehicle. If the driver was dangerous, we would have had very few options. We were kids. We were small. We were on a canyon road. We had no phones in the way people do now, no easy way to track our location, no real plan if things went bad. The man may have been harmless. In fact, based on what happened, he probably was. But the situation itself was not harmless. That is what I understand now. Sometimes I think about him and wonder if he ever remembered us. Maybe not. Maybe we were just two kids he gave a ride to one day, and he never thought about it again. Maybe he noticed how quiet we got. Maybe he saw us staring. Maybe he knew exactly why we were scared, and maybe it hurt him. I hope not, but I cannot know. I wish I could go back and see him with adult eyes instead of a child's fear. I wish I could thank him for dropping us off safely. I wish I could undo the way I thought about him in that moment. But memory does not work that way. The memory I have is still the memory of terror. I can still feel the bench seat under me. I can still feel my knees angled away from the stick shift. I can still see my best friend's face as she looked down in horror. I can still see that metal contraption where his arm should have been, dinged and worn, with the end shaped like a huge bottle opener. I can still feel my body shaking. The belief that this was the dangerous stranger we had been lucky enough to avoid until then. I can still feel the silence inside that truck. And I can still feel the relief when he stopped where he was supposed to. That relief was enormous, but it was not the kind that makes you laugh. It was the kind that leaves you hollow. We got out, and the danger was over. But something had changed. We were not brave little kids cheating the system anymore. We were two children who had scared themselves badly enough to finally understand that we had been gambling with our safety. We never needed to discuss it, because the lesson had already been learned in our bodies. I have carried two feelings from that day ever since, and they do not fit together neatly. One is guilt. Guilt for fearing a man who, as far as I know, did nothing but help us. Guilt for turning his appearance and disability into something terrifying in my mind. Guilt for not understanding that he may have had a hard life and hard circumstances, and that his roughness did not make him cruel or dangerous. The older I get, the more I feel that part. I see him less as a scary stranger, and more as a person who probably had his own pain, his own story, his own reasons for looking the way he did. The other feeling is the memory of real terror, the kind that does not listen to guilt or logic, the kind that takes over the body before the mind can explain anything. I can know now that he was probably harmless and still remember how badly I shook. I can feel compassion for him and still remember thinking I might die. Both things are true, even if they are uncomfortable together. That day did not become a story about a man who hurt us, because he did not. It became a story about fear, childhood, danger, and the way a moment can teach you something that adults had been trying to tell you all along. We were lucky, not just with him, but all the times before him, too. We had been lucky over and over, and that ride finally made us understand that luck is not the same as safety. He dropped us off where the bus did and drove away. My best friend and I got out, shaken and silent. We both knew we had been scared out of our minds. We both knew we were never doing that again. And we never did. Even now, I feel bad for being afraid of him. I hope he was a decent man who was only trying to help two kids get to where they needed to go. I hope life was kinder to him than it looked from the outside. But I also cannot forget that feeling in the truck, that sudden cold terror of realizing we were children sitting beside a stranger on a canyon road, with no real way out if our fear turned out to be right. My dad is not a religious person, and he has never been the type to believe in supernatural things. He is the kind of person who makes fun of ghost stories, signs from the universe, spirits, dreams that mean something, and all those strange little moments people talk about when they cannot explain what happened to them. If someone says they saw something in the corner of their room, he is usually the first one to say it was probably a shadow. If someone says they heard a voice, he will say they were tired or half asleep. If someone says they felt a presence, he will shrug and say the human brain is good at scaring itself. That has always been his way. He is practical, blunt, and not easy to impress when it comes to anything that cannot be explained with common sense. That is why this story has always stayed with me. It did not come from someone who wants to believe in ghosts. It did not come from someone who enjoys making every strange thing sound mysterious. It came from my dad, a man who would rather laugh at supernatural stories than take them seriously. He is not dramatic about it either. He does not sit around telling people that he had some deep spiritual experience or that he has proof of life after death. In fact, most of the time, he acts like he does not even like talking about it. But every now and then, if the subject comes up in the right way, he will mention this one thing that happened to him, and even he does not have an explanation for it. When my dad was a child, his family had a housemaid who worked for them for many years. This was when he was still young, and from what I understand, she was around the house enough that she became part of the rhythm of his childhood. She was not just some random person who came and went without anyone noticing. She was there during the ordinary days, the quiet mornings, the afternoons when the house was busy, the small moments that children remember without realizing they are becoming memories. My dad would have seen her around the kitchen, the hallways, the rooms, doing the work she had to do, talking to my grandmother, maybe telling him to move out of the way, or eat something, or stop making a mess. I do not know every detail of their relationship, because my dad does not tell stories like that in a soft, emotional way, but I know she had been part of his childhood home. Then, when he was probably around 12 or 13 years old, she moved away. Life changed, like it always does. People leave. Families move on. Children grow up. The people who once seemed like permanent parts of your world slowly disappear into the background of memory. At that age, my dad was probably old enough to understand that she was gone, but young enough that he did not think too deeply about it. When you are a child, even someone leaving your daily life can feel normal after a while. One day they're there, and then they are not. At first, you notice their absence. Then the house adjusts. The days continue. The empty space they left behind slowly gets filled by other things. After she moved away, my dad did not keep in contact with her. He was a child, so that is not surprising. She was someone from his parents' household, not one of his school friends or close relatives. As the years went by, he thought about her less and less. Eventually, he did not think about her at all. That is not meant in a cruel way. It is just how life works. People from childhood can become like old photographs in the back of your mind. You do not hate them. You do not forget them completely. But you stop carrying them with you every day. More than 15 years passed. By then, my dad was no longer a boy. He had grown up and built his own life. He had responsibilities, routines, and worries that had nothing to do with the housemaid from his childhood. He had not spoken to her in over a decade. He had not seen her. He had not heard any recent news about her. From what he says, he had not even been thinking about her. There was no reason for her to be on his mind. No family gathering had brought up her name. No old photo had reminded him of her. No conversation had made him think back to that part of his childhood. She was simply not present in his thoughts. Then one night, everything changed in the strangest possible way. My dad says he woke up suddenly in the middle of the night. It was not the kind of waking where you slowly drift back from a dream and realize you need water or the bathroom. It was sharp and sudden, like something had pulled him awake. He was fully awake almost at once, lying there in the dark, with a feeling he could not explain pressing on him. He had an overwhelming urge to contact the old housemaid. That was it. No dream he could remember. No voice in the room. No figure standing at the foot of the bed. No dramatic vision or message. Just a sudden, powerful need to reach out to a woman he had not spoken to or even thought about in more than 15 years. At first, he did not understand it. He lay there trying to make sense of why her name had appeared in his mind after so long. It was not like he had been worrying about her. It was not like he had promised to call her and forgotten. It was not like she was part of his daily life. She belonged to a completely different time, a time when he was still a boy in his family's house. Yet there she was in his thoughts, suddenly and strongly, as if someone had placed her name directly in front of him and would not let him look away. The feeling would not pass. That is the part he always makes clear. It was not a quick thought that came and went. It was not the normal kind of random memory that sometimes appears at night when your mind is half asleep. Everyone gets those. You suddenly remember an old teacher, a childhood neighbor, someone you once knew, and then you fall back asleep. But this was different. He felt like he had to do something. He felt like he needed to contact her. It was urgent in a way that made no sense. My dad is not the sort of man who follows strange feelings easily. He is not someone who wakes up and thinks, maybe this is a sign. He would usually talk himself out of it. He would tell himself he was dreaming, or that his mind was wandering, or that he had eaten too late and slept badly. But this feeling was strong enough that he could not ignore it. Something about it bothered him too much. It kept pulling at him. The problem was that he did not have her number. He had not spoken to her in years, and this was someone connected to his childhood home, not his current life. So he did the only thing that made sense. He called my grandmother. Imagine being my grandmother in that moment. It was the middle of the night, or at least late enough that a phone call would not feel normal. She answered, probably wondering what was wrong, because unexpected calls at odd hours rarely feel harmless. And then my dad asked about the old housemaid. Not about a current emergency, not about something practical, but about someone from the past. Someone he had not asked about in years. My grandmother was probably surprised. How could she not be? There was no normal reason for him to bring her up at that exact moment. No reason for him to be asking about her in the middle of the night after more than 15 years of silence. But then, my grandmother told him something that made the whole situation impossible to dismiss. The housemaid had passed away about half an hour before he called. Not the day before. Not a week earlier. Not some vague recent time that could be brushed off as coincidence more easily. About 30 minutes before his phone call. That means my dad woke up with an unexplained urge to contact a woman he had not thought about in over a decade. And when he called to ask about her, he found out she had just died. That is the whole story, and yet it is the kind of story that does not leave you alone. Nothing jumps out. No ghost appears. No door slams shut. No lights flicker. But in some ways, that makes it more unsettling. It is quiet. It is simple. It happens inside a person. In the space between sleep and waking. In the strange private place where thoughts come from somewhere we do not always understand. And because it happened to my dad, of all people, it feels even harder to explain away. For anyone else, he might have made fun of it. If one of his friends told him I woke up and suddenly felt like calling someone, and then I found out they had just died, he probably would have said it was a coincidence. He might have said that the mind remembers more than we think, or that maybe they had heard something about the person without realizing it. He might have said people only remember the strange coincidences and forget the thousands of random thoughts that mean nothing. And honestly, those are fair points. They are the kind of explanations that practical people give, and most of the time, they might be right. But this happened to him, and that changes things. My dad still does not walk around calling himself a believer. He did not become religious because of it. He did not start telling people he had a message from the other side. He did not suddenly believe every ghost story he heard after that. He remained the same man in most ways. Skeptical, practical, ready to joke about supernatural stuff. But when this one memory comes up, there is always a slight change in him. Not fear exactly. Not sadness exactly. More like discomfort. Like the story does not fit neatly into the way he wants the world to work. I think what scares people most about stories like this is not that they prove something. It is that they suggest something. They suggest that maybe there are connections between people, that do not end just because years pass. They suggest that maybe a part of us can feel something happening far away, even when we do not know it in any normal way. They suggest that death might send out a ripple, and sometimes, for reasons we cannot understand, that ripple reaches someone who once mattered. The old housemaid had been part of my dad's childhood. Maybe, even after all those years, some part of that connection still existed. Maybe he had forgotten her in the normal daily way, but some deeper part of him had not. Maybe, when she passed away, something in him felt it. Not with his ears, not with his eyes, not with any of the normal senses, but in a way that woke him up and pushed her name into his mind. Or maybe it was only coincidence. That is the uncomfortable thing. There is always a normal answer, if you want one badly enough. People think random thoughts all the time. Out of all the people we remember in our lives, eventually one of those memories might line up with something happening to that person. Maybe my dad's mind randomly pulled her name from the past on the same night she died. Maybe the timing was strange, but not impossible. Maybe there is no message, no sign, no supernatural connection. Maybe it was just chance. But chance does not always feel like enough. It might explain the facts, but it does not explain the feeling. It does not explain why he woke up so suddenly. It does not explain why the urge was strong enough for a skeptical man to call his mother and ask about someone he had not spoken to in more than 15 years. It does not explain why the call came only about half an hour after she had passed. It does not explain why, out of every person from his past, it was her name that came to him at that exact time. I sometimes wonder what he felt after my grandmother told him. I imagine him sitting there in the dark with the phone in his hand, suddenly much more awake than before. I imagine the room feeling too quiet around him. I imagine him trying to respond normally, maybe asking a few questions, maybe not saying much at all, because what can you really say to something like that? If he had been worried about her for days, it would make sense. If someone had told him she was sick, it would make sense. If he had dreamed about her and then called later out of curiosity, that would still be strange, but easier to frame. But waking with a sudden need to contact her right after she died is something else. It is the kind of thing that makes even a skeptical person pause. I do not know much about the housemaid herself. I do not know what kind of life she had after she moved away. I do not know whether she ever thought about my dad or his family in her later years. I do not know if she remembered him as the boy he had been, running around the house when she worked there. Maybe she did. Maybe she did not. But I like to think that people who spend years inside a home leave marks on each other, even if life carries them in different directions. A child remembers the adults who were there. An adult remembers the children they watched grow for a while. Those connections may fade, but maybe they do not disappear completely. Maybe, at the end of her life, something reached back. I know that sounds sentimental, and my dad would probably roll his eyes if I said it too dramatically. But I cannot help thinking about it. Maybe she did not come to him as a ghost in the way people imagine. Maybe there was no spirit standing beside his bed. Maybe it was not a haunting. Maybe it was simply a final pull from one life to another. A quiet goodbye passing through whatever space exists between people who once shared time together. That idea feels less frightening to me than some ghost stories. It feels sad and strange, but also gentle. My dad did not wake up terrified. He did not see something awful. He just woke up with the need to remember someone. Someone who at almost the same time had just left the world. And maybe that is why the story feels so real. It is not overdone. It is not trying to be scary. It does not need a haunted house or a shadowy figure. It is just a man waking in the dark with a name in his mind, calling his mother, and learning that the person connected to that name had died 30 minutes earlier. Even now, I think about how easily that moment could have been missed. If he had ignored the feeling and gone back to sleep, he might have heard the news later and never connected it. If he had waited until morning, the timing would have seemed less sharp. If he had brushed it off as a random thought, it would have become nothing. But he did call. He acted on the urge, and because of that, the timing became clear. That is what makes the story hard to forget. It also makes me wonder how many moments like that happen to people and get dismissed. How many times does someone think of an old friend right before receiving bad news? How many people wake up with a strange heaviness and later find out someone they knew passed away? How many of those moments are brushed aside because they do not fit into normal conversation? Maybe more than we think. Maybe the world is full of quiet connections we only notice when something extreme happens. My dad would probably not like that explanation. He would probably say I am making it bigger than it is. He might still call it coincidence if someone pressed him. But I know that even for him, this one thing has never had a clean answer. He can make fun of supernatural stories all he wants, but there is still this one story in his own life that does not fit his usual way of thinking. That is why I believe it matters. Not because it proves ghosts are real. Not because it proves religion or spirits or anything specific. But because it shows that sometimes something happens that makes even the most skeptical person stop and wonder. Sometimes the world gives you a moment that feels too exact to be random and too quiet to be fake. Sometimes someone from the past reaches your mind at the exact moment they leave the world, and all you can do is sit there afterward and try to explain why. My dad was not close to the housemaid anymore. He had not spoken to her in years. He had not even thought about her in over a decade. But on the night she died, about half an hour after she passed, he woke up with an urge he could not explain. He called my grandmother, asked about her, and learned the truth. That is all that happened. And somehow, that is enough to make the story one of the strangest things I have ever heard. If you've stayed with me this far, then these stories didn't simply pass the time. They stayed with you. Everything you heard tonight was real. Real people. Real moments. And in each one, something quietly slipped out of place. If you'd like more of the kind that don't let go so easily, subscribe to Crowvane Manor. There are more rooms left open, and more stories waiting behind every door. I'm grateful you spent this part of your night here. Rest well, and I'll be waiting when you return.